The new RWBY anime, Ice Queendom, is just around the corner, and although we don't have much information on the direction of the plot as of yet, we have been given enough so we can piece together what we can expect from the beginnings of the series itself. But before I get into that, there are a couple key things I want to make everyone aware of. First of all, if you haven't heard already, the official release date for the first episode of Ice Queendom is July 3rd. It is going to be released at 10:30 p.m. Japan Standard Time, so make sure to convert that to your own time zone, and it'll likely be released sometime on Sunday for you, and you'll be able to watch it then. And then every episode will be airing on the subsequent Sundays after that. But although July 3rd is the official release date, we are actually going to get the first 3 episodes all at once in a preview next weekend, on June 24th at 8 p.m. Japan Standard Time, and they will only be available for about 2 days, until midnight on June 26th, Japan Standard Time. Again, convert that to your local time zone so you can figure out exactly when these episodes are going to be made available. I'll leave a link to the announcement in the description below. They will be distributed both in English and Japanese. As far as I'm aware, the worldwide distribution, or rather the English distribution, and likely subtitled distribution, is going to be distributed through Crunchyroll. And with those 3 episodes only available for about 2 days, there's kind of a short window to watch those episodes before they will be taken down, and you'll have to wait to the official release to see them all. So make sure to mark your calendars for a week from today so you can watch the first 3 episodes of Ice Queendom. And they chose the first 3 for a very good reason. After we got the initial trailer for Ice Queendom, a couple days later, there was an announcement from the Rooster Teeth staff, where they gave us a slight bit more information on Ice Queendom. I'll link that in the description below as well, but I want to focus on what they said about the first 2 episodes of the series itself. The first 2 episodes are going to be recapping volumes 1 to 2, and then the 3rd episode is going to be kind of moving off into a bold new direction, as they put it. So there is going to be differences from the initial RWBY series, obviously, because being able to recap 2 entire volumes in the first 2 episodes, it's impossible. There are things that are going to have to be cut, and that is further emphasized by the other information that has been revealed for Ice Queendom thus far. When the trailer was released, there was a website that went up sort of detailing information for Ice Queendom itself, giving us some details on the world of Remnant as a whole, the Grimm, semblances, aura, etc., as well as the main characters that we'd be following, all of Team RWBY and all of Team Juniper. But since then, they've added in the secondary, or I guess tertiary, characters that we will see throughout the anime, or at least the first couple episodes. I'm guessing that they're giving us the character bios of our main characters as well as our secondary characters to not only refresh those of us who are already familiar with the RWBY series as to who these characters are, because some of them we have not seen for a very long time, but also to give an introduction to anyone new to the RWBY series, because again, recapping the first 2 volumes in just 2 episodes is gonna be a lot, and we're gonna have a lot of characters introduced all at once, and it's gonna be a little bit overwhelming for someone who is just brand new to the series. So giving these character bios kind of introduces the characters that are going to be present. Again, my guess, the ones that are going to be present in these first 2 episodes. And seeing the characters that are going to be present tells us a lot about what is going to be covered in these first 2 episodes in particular. Because, take a look at the secondary characters that we have. We have Ozpin, Glinda Goodwitch, Peter Port, Penny Polendina, Roman Torchwick. Roman's coming back, thankfully, really happy to see him here, as well as Sun Wukong and Taiyang Xiaolong. Do you notice anyone that's missing from that character roster? Anyone that might be important to Volume 1? And in particular, the opening episode of Volume 1. Cinder Fall is not present, meaning that I have a feeling she might not be present in Ice Queendom at all, which is already going to deviate from the RWBY series itself in episode 1, because that is how RWBY gets into Beacon. Glinda comes and intervenes in the fight between RWBY and Cinder, Glinda fighting Cinder in RWBY's place, And then Glinda takes Ruby, meets Ozpin, that's how she gets into Beacon Academy. We've already seen in the Ice Queendom trailer itself that Ruby is fighting against Roman Torchwick's thugs. So the fight that we see Ruby initially in against Roman Torchwick at the beginning of Volume 1, that is going to happen in the anime. But whether Cinder is going to show up at the end of it, or how Roman is going to get out of that situation, escape from Ruby, that remains to be seen, but Cinder is likely not going to be a focused character in this series, if even introduced at all, so I'm curious to see how that's going to go. And to be clear, that does make sense for Ice Queendom branching off in a different direction, because Cinder's main goal throughout the entire RWBY series, or at least the first 3 volumes, was to disrupt Beacon Academy. She's not leaving Beacon Academy. We've already seen from the outfits of every one of the main cast, they're all in winter attire. They're going to go somewhere cold. And with the series focusing on Weiss herself, most likely, that's going to be Atlas. So with Cinder staying at Beacon Academy, along with Emerald and Mercury, unfortunately, we're likely not getting either of them animated either, as they were introduced right at the end of Volume 1, beginning of Volume 2, when they became more prevalent. With them not being introduced here, not having character bios, they're probably not going to even be introduced into Ice Queendom, which is a damn shame, because Mercury's fighting style in 2D animation would be incredible to see, and I'd really love to see Emerald animated as well. Her sass and attitude, it would be fantastic. Maybe if there's a Season 2 or another animated series that might come up at some point in the future, but for Ice Queendom, I don't think either of these 3 characters are going to be present. Because if we think about it, having only 2 episodes that are going to be the standard anime episode length, which is 22 minutes, with about 2-minute opening, 2-minute closing, that's about 18 minutes of content. So between 36 minutes covering the first 2 volumes of RWBY, they can only include so much. As a side note, if you are looking for a brief refresher of Volumes 1 and 2 before Ice Queendom begins, there is a neat little series on the Rooster Teeth YouTube channel that would be just what you're looking for, aptly named RWBY Recap. I'll leave that linked in the corner up above if you guys are interested in checking that out. And we've also been given the names of the first 3 episodes of Ice Queendom. The first, of course, being Red, White, Black, and Yellow, and in quotations, Departure. This being the introductory episode to the entire RWBY series, to our main characters, Ruby, Weiss, Blake, and Yang. And this episode, is my guess, is going to cover the initiation at Beacon Academy. Because you need to give the due diligence to the initiation. That is going to take up a decent amount of time. We already know they're going to animate the Nevermore fight. We saw that in the trailer, as well as the interactions between Ruby and Weiss. I'm curious to see how much they're going to animate of Team Juniper's adventures during that initiation. Jean and the Deathstalker, and the entirety of Team Juniper having to defeat the Deathstalker. I wonder if that's going to be included at all as well. But with Team Juniper being included in the main character roster, I'm hoping that it will be, and that'll be the main focus of Episode 1. And then the second episode of Ice Queendom is titled This is Beacon, with the word exam in quotations. And of course the word exam, since we haven't really seen that many tests in the RWBY series itself, could be referencing the initiation, but again, covering an entire 2 volumes in 2 episodes, you're going to be moving pretty quickly. There are going to be things that are going to have to be skipped. And the initiation is very early on. I'm guessing that's going to be covered in Episode 1. The exam that I think they're going to be referring to in this episode is that of Weiss against the Borbitusk, the test of being a huntress, something that was very prominent to Weiss's character in Volume 1 of the RWBY series, something that was featured in the Ice Queendom trailer, and also makes sense as to why Peter Port is the professor that is featured in these character bios. Because another prominent character that is absent from these character bios is Dr. Oobleck, who arguably is the more important professor out of those at Beacon Academy. Peter Port was definitely more relevant in Volume 1, not only because of the entire scene of Weiss facing the Borbitusk, but Port was also the one who talked to Weiss afterwards and told her that Ozpin likely didn't make a mistake by putting Ruby in charge. And I think that's going to be the key turning point, where in the original RWBY series, Weiss accepts that and is going to be the best teammate she can be, and I think this is where the deviation point is going to happen in Ice Queendom. And I think this would break things up very nicely, having episode 1 focus on the initiation, having episode 2 focus on the, team dynamic trying to work itself out, and in this version ultimately not working the way it did in the original RWBY series. Because again, Dr. Oobleck is not featured, and the only time Dr. Oobleck was on screen in Volume 1 was during the Jaundice episodes. Also, Cardin Winchester is not featured on these character rosters at all, so the Jaundice episodes probably aren't even going to happen at all in Ice Queendom, which, might take away a little bit from Jean's character growth, but the series itself is likely not going to focus on Jean that much. Team Juniper is probably going to be more secondary characters in and of themselves. We will have to wait and see, but this kind of does make sense for how the pacing, I think, of Ice Queendom is going to go. And then episode 3, titled A Nightmare Comes, with nightmare in quotations, is going to be where things branch off. This is where the plot is going to deviate. As to what that nightmare might be, probably grim of some sort. We know that there is a grim attack at the end of Volume 2, but I really have a feeling that Volume 2 probably isn't going to be touched on much at all during Ice Queendom. To me, it would make the most sense to have Ice Queendom branch off before Volume 2 even starts. Another character that isn't featured in this roster is Neptune Vasilius, Sun's partner. Sun is obviously featured in Ice Queendom as he shows up in Volume 1 and has that interaction with Blake. That's how we get introduced to her backstory, her previous connection to the White Fang, and why her and Weiss have some conflicts throughout Volume 1. That conflict will likely be included in Ice Queendom, considering that Sun is a mentioned character and he's going to be present in Ice Queendom. That's likely going to be there, but I don't know how prevalent the White Fang in and of themselves are going to be. Adam Toros, who was introduced in the Black trailer before the RWBY series even began, isn't featured in this character roster either. So the White Fang, although they did work alongside Roman Torchwick in Volume 1 at the docks, that final battle at the docks between Roman, Blake, and Sun, I would love to see that animated, but I have a feeling that's not even going to be in Ice Queendom either, that the show is going to branch off like either right around there or at some point immediately after. Because Volume 2 of the RWBY series starts off in their second term. There is a gap in time between the end of Volume 1 and the beginning of Volume 2. So Volume 1, that could all take place in the first couple months of their first term at Beacon Academy. Assuming that the terms are 4 months long, there's a couple month gap that they could easily work with and kind of insert Ice Queendom into it, having it be canon adjacent, which is what they're calling it, though I still think it's alternate universe. I'll reserve my judgment until I see how the series handles it itself, but with things deviating, with these characters seeming to have such drastic changes with some of their designs, I think it's pretty safe to say that this is going to be an alternate timeline at the very least. Volume 1 is going to start out the way it is and then branch off, deviate at some point. I really have the feeling that the events of Volume 2 probably aren't going to be covered in Ice Queendom at all, which makes it a bit confusing in that announcement how the first 2 episodes are going to cover Volumes 1 to 2. I really think it's just going to be Volume 1, because not only is Neptune not featured as a mentioned character in the secondary/tertiary characters, the minor character roles that are going to be present throughout Ice Queendom, neither is Neo, who made her first appearance as well in Volume 2. Which is a real shame, because I would have really liked to see Neo animated, but considering she's not even listed as a minor character, probably not going to be appearing in Ice Queendom. And the same is also true for Raven. She made a brief appearance in Volume 2 on the train, but considering they're probably not going to get into the entire backstory between Yang and Raven, they will not have time to explore that in Ice Queendom, that's probably not going to be introduced either. Same with Cinder. Her entire plotline really gets going in Volume 3 when Beacon falls. We're not even going to get to the Vital Festival tournament, that's not even going to be a factor, so there's a lot of things that aren't going to be covered, which is another reason why Oobleck's absence, him not being mentioned as a minor character, is very important, because the entire second half of Volume 2 was the mission that Team RWBY went on with Dr. Oobleck as their chaperone. With him not even being mentioned as a minor character, that entire arc that he followed along with Team RWBY makes him more of an important character in my mind than Peter Port. but Peter Port's mentioned, Dr. Oobleck isn't. Makes me think we're not even going to make it that far in Volume 2 or even get to Volume 2 at all. It would make sense to branch at Volume 1. But there is one very interesting inclusion in the minor characters, Tai Yang Xiaolong, which really leads me to believe that Tai Yang, of course, is going to make an appearance of some sort. We didn't see him until Volume 3 in the show proper. We saw him right at the beginning of the volume in, like, the background, and then we saw him introduced properly at the final episode of the volume, after Ruby had woken up from her, I guess, coma or unconsciousness after using her silver eyes at the top of Beacon Tower. She woke up in her own home, and that's when we first saw Tai Yang properly. But if he's going to be a character that is going to have some screen time in Ice Queendom, that's going to be interesting to see. I would love to see him fight, so we get to learn his fighting style, maybe his weapons, but we'll have to wait and see. Another character that people were kind of hoping to see in Ice Queendom was Crow, of course. I would love to see Crow as well, but that's not going to happen either. Crow wasn't even introduced into the RWBY series until Volume 3. He was, of course, mentioned in Volume 1 when Ozpin asked RWBY, how are you trained like that? I've only seen one other scythe wielder of your caliber. RWBY said it was her Uncle Crow. That was the only time he was mentioned. And he might be mentioned in Ice Queendom, but he will not be making an appearance. We know that he's out doing reconnaissance for Ozpin. He sent that message to Ozpin, the Queen has her pawns. So he will not be making an appearance in Ice Queendom unless they tried to do something as a bit of a side story with him. Because we do know for a fact that RWBY's first reunion with Crow was after his fight with Winter in Volume 3. So it would be a massive break from canon if RWBY interacted with him in some way. But that isn't to say he can't interact with other characters while out doing reconnaissance. Maybe he's an Atlas for something, visiting Winter or Ironwood or something like that. So he could make an appearance, but I wouldn't bank on it, and even if he does, it's probably only going to be in passing. It's not going to be anything prominent in the show itself. Overall, it seems like from everything that I can gather from the characters that we can expect to see within the first couple episodes of the series, the familiar characters at least, that the anime of Ice Queendom is only going to cover the first portion of Volume 1, that it's going to focus on the initiation and then the conflicts within the team itself, namely between Weiss and RWBY. I do think that the conflict between Weiss and Blake is going to come up as well, and that might compound itself so that Weiss just doesn't feel like she belongs on the team. She doesn't accept RWBY as a leader, she doesn't accept Blake being a part of the White Fang, and then it branches off from there. She breaks away from the team, and that is where the story follows. I'm speculating at this point that they're going to Atlas based on their winter attire, but we'll have to wait and see what direction the series itself goes in. Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments below. Do you think it's a pretty fair assumption that the first couple episodes of Ice Queendom are going to focus on pretty much Volume 1 and then branch off from there? Or do you think that there's a way that they're going to be able to cover even some of the events of Volume 2 without including Neptune Vasilius, Cinderfall, Emerald, Mercury, or Neo in any capacity, as well as probably most relevant to Volume 2, Dr. Oobleck. There's a number of characters that just weren't listed here. Maybe they were left out for some other reason and they're going to be introduced in the series, or that's how we're going to get to know them, and we don't need the character bio on them to be introduced to the character. But I really feel, since Peter Port, of all people, is going to be mentioned here, that well, I don't think we're going to see that much of Volume 2. But we are going to get Penny introduced, so a number of the crucial moments from Volume 1 are certainly going to be there. The initiation and Weiss's fight against the Borbatusk, as I already mentioned, probably Blake and Sun's interactions, as well as meeting Penny for the first time. But the Episode 3, titled A Nightmare Comes, that one's going to be interesting to see. I don't know exactly what this nightmare could be. Is it going to be that the Grim attack that we saw at the end of Volume 2 is going to happen earlier, that Roman Torchwick is leading more Grim to the city, and that's the nightmare that's arriving, which would, deviate a little bit from canon, break things into a new direction, and perhaps after that nightmare, whatever it is, that's when Weiss actually goes back to Atlas. Maybe it's a choice she makes herself that she feels like she doesn't belong, or maybe her father comes to get her at that point. In the original series, Jacques Schnee came to get Weiss at the end of Volume 3, after Beacon had fallen, deeming it no longer safe for his daughter. Obviously, the school wasn't functioning anymore, so he probably thought bring her back to Atlas as well. That's the perfect time, considering he didn't want her to go to Beacon in the first place, but this nightmare that arrives in Episode 3, a Grim attack perhaps, maybe that's enough for Jacques to say, no, I don't want you here anymore, you're coming back to Atlas. Weiss may be a bit more open to the idea due to the conflicts with her team, etc. And after that point, as well as with the new outfits, not exactly sure how things are going to connect, but I am really looking forward to seeing where this new series takes us. Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments below as to how you think it's going to deviate. What portions of Volumes 1 and perhaps Volume 2 do you think they're going to cover? How do you think they're going to work things together with only apparently the first 2 episodes recapping Volumes 1 to 2? In my mind, I think it's mostly going to be Volume 1, because trying to mash so many things into a single episode is probably going to be a little bit too much, especially for people who are new to the RWBY series. With this airing on Crunchyroll, I'm guessing there's going to be a lot of new eyes on RWBY, so we'll see how things go. Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments below, and what you are looking forward to most in Ice Queendom. For me, definitely seeing Pyrrha come back, and I want to see what new things they're going to do with her character, as well as this new direction that they are going to take Weiss. But with that being said, with these 3 episodes coming out in only 1 week, I'm certainly going to be covering them on this channel, and we shall see where the Ice Queen shall take us. If you like this kind of content and want to see more like it, make sure to subscribe and join the Guild of the Eternal Flame. Tweet me at PhoenixKnight7, and I'll see you guys in the next video.